Buddy, welcome to Lead with Love. I'm Chris Greco. I'm your host for the next 30 minutes or so. What what I've been trying to do with the Lead with Love format is originally I was interviewing individuals who shared their talents and love, learn, offer, value, educate, all these things that they do to try to help people. And then I started looking at some some people from the past that basically have contributed have contributed something that basically saved the world. And last week, I talked about an individual, a um, a man who took a risk, and because that risk basically saved the world from nuclear disaster in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to follow that up today with Men Who Saved the World Part Two, to talk about another man by the name of Stan. So we're going to talk about that during the few minutes and then talk about how this individual really did save the world and why he did that and what it meant. So let's get started. Men Who Saved the World Part 2. So the man we're going to talk about is Stan. Why are we talking about this? Russia right now in their war and with their war in Ukraine is threatening nuclear war. There are people of power in Russia that do not want that. They don't want nuclear disaster the same way in the United States. A lot of people speak openly about, wow, we got to just go to war. We got to do this. I don't think people understand, and they don't actually. War is death. War is destruction. War is killing people and property, destroying property. These are things you have to build back up. Lives, you can't resurrect lives. They're dead, or they're wounded or they're traumatized. And we're talking about children. We're talking about war is a horrible, horrible existence. And the people in Ukraine right now that are going through this, and I'll admit, I have no idea what they're going through, and neither do the people in America. And that is something that, but are there reasonable people? Yes, there are. There were people that stopped nuclear holocaust in the past, one of which we're going to talk about today. People are reasonable and will make the right decision, but those people have to come forward. They have to show strength. It's really difficult. I'll be the first to admit, that it's tough showing strength in, with adversity, especially with adversity in numbers. It's very difficult to show that strength. It's scary. It's a scary situation. Um, There are movies. There are movies about people that stand for the right things. Failsafe is a good movie, a 1960s movie. Stars Henry Fonda as the president, playing the president in time of a nuclear crisis, and Crimson Tide. Denzel Washington. And about how people have to step forward. It's tough. There are those that reason through orders, that reason through process, that reason through procedure. Those are the people that it's sometimes difficult to understand what it's like. As a young lieutenant when I was stationed overseas in the 1970s, got a phone call from the radio station that said, "Sir, there's an issue here. The president is on the line. We need to do something." And I thought, oh my gosh, we're at war. We're going to war. The president would not get on the air other than that. And it turned out to be the first declaration of Armed Services Day in May. Scared the living bejeebers out of me. You sit there and you don't know what it's like until faced with that situation. Well, all of a sudden, you're the first phone call that's made, and it's really a scary thing. I was officer of the day at the time. So those are the people we'll discuss and we'll talk about reasoning through orders. Very, very important. So who are we talking about? We're talking about Stan. So born in 1939 in a major city on the east side of his country, on the east coast, actually, of his country. His father was a fighter pilot, World War II. His mother was a nurse. He attended a military-based engineering school and completed his studies in 1972. Now you have to remember now, everything 1972, Cold War was only, what, 12 years old at that point in time. I mean, there's a big deal about this whole situation that's happening. Joined his military's air defense forces and assigned, because he was an IT guy, information technology, computers aspect. Now I got to remember, again, this is 72, right? So computers are big and they're bulky and they're not, you don't have PCs, you don't have personal computers. You have basically what they call green screen type aspects, where you put the commands in and the computer replies. Assigned to oversee a new early warning system. Now, the early warning system was designed so that it would detect missiles being launched at Stan's country. So now all of a sudden, we understand this, right? There's adversaries, there's friendly aspects, and how does that work? So he was posted to a unit just outside his nation's capital city in 1983. 83 was an interesting year. Just an interesting year, folks. I mean, a lot of things were happening. A year after that, 2 years after that, they had the Libyans were responsible for terrorism in Berlin, killed some army people. All of a sudden we had El Dorado Canyon at that point in time. You can look that up. So there's a lot of things happening in the early 1980s. Interesting to be an intelligence officer at that point in time, let me tell you. So let's talk about the incident. The incident was on September 26, 1983, just a few weeks after his birthday. Alarms were activated on that early warning system that I referred to earlier. So according to the alarms, there had been an intercontinental ballistic missile ICBM launch from an adversary against Stan's country. One warning started, and then 4 more occurring after the first. So 5 warnings in total. The reliability, according to policy and process and everything, was the highest reliability for these warnings. He was required to communicate with the country's chief executive to order retaliatory nuclear attack. So this happened just a few weeks after an airliner was down. Now, that was the Korean airliner. I think it was called 007. I think it was Korean Airlines 007. It was downed. It was misidentified as an Air Force reconnaissance aircraft and shot down. All people aboard dead. So, very high tensions between two countries, between two major countries. So the results, what happened as a result of this thing? Stan flagged the alarms as false. Now, why did he do that? First of all, he knew that this system that had just been put in he wasn't real confident of the accuracy. I mean, this thing had just been installed. So it hadn't been fully debugged. I mean, there's a lot of things that he didn't feel was real confident. So he decided that he felt they were false. No confidence the system was accurate. Ground-based radar did not detect a launch, which it would have with that area. And he did not believe that the adversary would only launch 5 missiles. Why only 5? If you're going to launch, you launch. You don't sit there and launch 5 missiles and then, wait for a retaliatory attack that's going to be 50 missiles or whatever, 100 missiles or whatever you're going to lay back at them. Although initially praised for his efforts, of his efforts during the command decision, he was reprimanded for not filing appropriate paperwork on the incident. So, I mean, just think about that for just a second here. He retired right after that. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time, retired and worked as a civilian engineer, and then retired shortly after that to take care of his wife who had a terminal disease. It was not until 1998, after a superior released his memoir, that the incident was actually known. So his accolades. 1997, his boss released his memoirs, and suddenly he's a hero. Known after 1998 as the man who saved the world. In 2004, he got the World Citizen Award by a San Francisco-based Association of World Citizens. In 2006, he was given the World Citizen Award by the United Nations. He was interviewed by Walter Cronkite, which was then filmed as a documentary and earned an honorable mention at the Woodstock Film Festival. In 2012, he received the German Media Award for 2011. In 2013, he received the Dresden Peace Prize from Dresden, Germany. And then he received an award in 2018 after his death called the Future of Life Award. In addition, there is a room named after him that is, when we talk about the future of life aspects, it's an organization that talks about life aspects, life and what exactly was going on. And him and Arkhipov, the individual that I talked about before in part 1. His life. He was married, but his wife passed away from cancer in 1997, 1 year before his accolades started, and the year of the release of the memoirs of his superior. He visited the adversary missile launch facility as part of a tour of that country. He died of pneumonia in 2017 at the age of 77. So who was this person? Why would we not know about him in the United States? Why is his picture not in the Smithsonian, or his life, or a statue, or something having to do with that in the United States? I mean, this individual, Stan, should be really well known. Well, it's because his name is Stanislav Petrov. He's a Soviet military officer, and the source, the reference, is at the bottom. You see him as a young man on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you see him as an older gentleman. And let me tell you something. It's interesting that Arkhipov, the individual I talked about the last program, was a Soviet military officer, Soviet naval officer, and this is a basically Soviet Air Force officer. I mean, we have to take a look at these things, folks. We have to take a look at people that keep their cool. And we talk about love, we talk about learn, offer, value, and educate, right? Well, what have we learned? We've learned that this individual questioned exactly the procedure that was being done, and because of that questioning, was able to avert a nuclear war. I mean, think about this for a second. He put his career in jeopardy so that he could save the world. I mean, who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't do that? So that's what. And what did he offer? He offered people life. He offered people the ability to keep on going. While we were sitting back in 1983, it's interesting because in 1983 I was a full-fledged intelligence officer stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland. I mean, we didn't hear about this at all in September of '83. That was shortly before I got married, and basically what happened is that we suddenly heard that we never even heard of this. I mean, probably some of the very, very highly sensitive people heard of it, but I never heard of this. So it was interesting how you're deep in the midst of intelligence and you still don't hear about all the things that happened at that point in time. Or it's just like, it was a mistake, no problem, because nobody got hurt. So that's what's going on there. And then educate. How is he educated? Well, he wasn't just an IT guy who just took okay, that's what the computer says, that's what we're going to do. He questioned that. What exactly do I do, and how do I make that work? And this is where this lead with love is very, very important, because if you don't lead this way, if you don't learn, offer, value, and educate during this whole situation, then basically we would be ashes right now. We'd be ashes, because basically if they would have launched, it would have been a first strike. They would have caught us completely off guard in 1983. I mean, it would have been a situation where we would have just gotten plastered with Soviet missiles. But this individual, the fact that he remained cool and he went through the steps, what needed to be done, saved the world. So there's something to be said for Stanislav Petrov. And I appreciate the fact that he does exist, and he helped do what needed to be done. So this is a short episode for Lead with Love, but I think it's important to understand exactly what we're talking about when we talk about this area. And I'll tell you, it's a situation where the more that you do things, when you share things and understand and you coolly, calmly try to understand how the procedure works and why this is different, it just works better. And I can tell you many stories that I've heard of people that have taken something and said, why don't we do it differently? And then all of a sudden it's done differently and it's done better. And things like that, when you take a look at this and you take a look at these areas, it just makes a lot of sense. My father told me a story about how his father was an assembly line worker, and they had to deburr the aluminum pipe that was coming out. And they wanted to buy a deburring tool to do that. And my grandfather said, basically, I'll do it. I'll do it with my knife, and I'll deburr all the pipe, and you won't have to spend all that money for those areas. And all of a sudden it was done. Save the money. They paid him whatever they're going to pay him, and the deburring was done. It was done correctly, and no deal, no problem. So that was, again, those are just situations where you see a procedure, you think of something better, you offer that, right? You offer the option. People value you enough to accept that offer, and then there's an education process that goes along with that. And I think it's funny that Stanislav Petrov, he was basically punished for doing the right thing, but that did not prevent him from doing it. So I think that's also very important. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it an episode. This is Lead with Love, and I'm Chris Greco, your host. And next week, or the next show, we'll talk about some other people that shared their lives and was able to make impact with that sharing. And that is what we're talking about when we talk about Lead with Love. So until next time, always lead with learning, offering, valuing, and educating. And if you lead with love, you're never going to set yourself short or set those people around you short. Take care. Have a great week.